The king who never died. The year was 1098, and Antioch had just fallen. The Byzantine soldiers were tired, their armor dented, their swords dull from fighting. The city was a mess. Broken walls, burned houses, bodies in the streets. The Crusaders had taken it for themselves, leaving the Byzantines to clean up the scraps. Captain Nikos, a grizzled man with a scar across his cheek, led his men through the ruins, looking for anything worth salvaging. That's when they found it, a massive stone structure, half buried under rubble, hidden in a valley just outside the city. It wasn't like any temple Nikos had seen. Its walls were black as night, covered in strange carvings, Greek letters mixed with Persian script, twisting together like a puzzle. The entrance was a huge stone slab, sealed tight, with no handles or hinges. Nikos ran his hand over the carvings, feeling a chill despite the desert heat. "What is this place?" he muttered. His second in command, a young soldier named Theo, squinted at the inscriptions. "I can read some of it," he said. "It's Old Greek. Says something about a king who'll rise when the empire's at its darkest." Nikos snorted. Fairy tales. Probably just a tomb for some forgotten lord. But he couldn't shake the unease in his gut. The air around the temple felt heavy, like it was watching them. He ordered his men to break the seal. It took hours, picks and hammers chipping away at the stone until it cracked open with a sound like thunder. Inside, the temple was dark and cold, the air thick with dust. Torches flickered, casting shadows on walls painted with faded gods, faces with empty eyes, hands holding flames and swords. At the center was a golden sarcophagus, so bright it hurt to look at. It was carved with more inscriptions, and on the lid was an image of a man, tall and regal, a crown of thorns on his head. "Open it," Nikos said, though his voice wavered. The men hesitated, but they obeyed, prying the lid off with crowbars. Inside was a mummified body, wrapped in brittle linen, its face hidden by a golden mask. The mask was flawless, almost alive, with eyes that seemed to stare back. A faint hum filled the air, low and eerie, like a distant chant. Theo stepped back, clutching the cross around his neck. "This ain't right, Captain. We shouldn't be here." Nikos ignored him. He reached for the mask, but before he could touch it, the hum stopped. The silence was worse. His hand froze, and he stepped back. "Seal it," he said. "We're not touching this." They closed the sarcophagus and dragged the stone slab back over the entrance. Nikos told his men to forget what they'd seen. "It's just a tomb," he said, but he didn't believe it. That night, he dreamed of the masked king, standing in the desert, his eyes glowing like embers. When he woke, his hands were shaking. The soldiers left Antioch, and the temple was forgotten. The years passed, the empire stumbled on, and the story of the golden sarcophagus became a whisper, a ghost tale told in barracks. Nikos never spoke of it again, but he carried the memory until he died. Centuries later, it was 1204, and Constantinople was burning. The Crusaders had come, not as allies but as wolves. They smashed through the city's great walls, looting churches, slaughtering anyone who resisted. The Byzantine Empire, once a beacon of the world, was crumbling. Smoke choked the air, and the streets ran red. In a small church near the Hagia Sophia, a priest named Elias hid with a handful of survivors. He was young, barely 20, with a scholar's mind and a heart full of faith. He'd heard the old stories, passed down from soldiers like Nikos, about a temple in Antioch and a king who'd rise when the empire needed him most. Elias had always thought it was a myth, but as the Crusaders' screams echoed outside, he prayed it was true. He clutched a tattered scroll, one he'd found in the church's archives. It was written in Greek and Persian, like the inscriptions Nikos had described. It spoke of a king named Ardashir, chosen by forgotten gods, sealed in gold to wait for the empire's darkest hour. "When the city falls," the scroll said, "he will walk again, serving neither Rome nor Constantinople, but the old ones who shaped the world." Elias didn't know who the old ones were. The gods of the Christians ruled now, or so he'd been taught. But the scroll's words stuck with him, and as the Crusaders battered the church doors, he whispered a prayer, not to his God, but to whatever power might listen. Miles away, in the valley near Antioch, the temple stirred. The sealed slab cracked, dust spilling like water. The hum returned, louder now, shaking the earth. Inside, The golden sarcophagus glowed, its light pulsing like a heartbeat. The mask on the mummified king twitched, then fell away. Eyes opened, black as coal, burning with something ancient. Ardashir, the king who never died, sat up. He stepped from the sarcophagus, his linen wrappings falling away. His body was no longer withered but strong, his skin smooth as bronze. The crown of thorns rested on his head, not a symbol of suffering but of power. He moved through the temple, his steps silent, his eyes fixed on some unseen point. The air crackled around him, and the carvings on the walls glowed faintly, as if welcoming him back. Outside, the desert was quiet, the stars cold above. Ardashir raised a hand, and the wind howled, carrying his voice. "The time has come," he said, though no one heard. He turned toward Constantinople, hundreds of miles away, and began to walk. In Constantinople, the church doors splintered. Elias and the survivors, a baker named Maria, an old soldier named Demetrius, and a girl named Zoe, pressed against the back wall. The Crusaders poured in, their armor clanking, their swords dripping. "Surrender," one shouted, his accent thick. "Give us your gold, and you might live." Elias clutched the scroll, his heart pounding. "We have nothing," he said, stepping forward. "This is a house of God." The Crusader laughed, raising his sword. But before he could strike, a shadow moved at the church's entrance. A man stood there, tall and silent, his body wrapped in a dark cloak. A crown of thorns gleamed on his head. The Crusaders froze, their eyes wide. The air grew heavy, like a storm was coming. "Who are you?" the lead Crusader demanded. The man didn't answer. He raised a hand, and the hum filled the church, so loud it made Elias's teeth ache. The Crusaders dropped their weapons, clutching their heads. One screamed, blood trickling from his ears. They stumbled out, fleeing into the night. Elias stared at the stranger. "Are you Ardashir?" The man's black eyes met his. "I am," he said, his voice deep, like it came from the earth itself. "The old ones call me. The city will not fall." Maria, the baker, fell to her knees. "You're the king from the stories. You've come to save us." Ardashir's face was unreadable. "I serve no one. Not you, not your city. Only the gods who made me." Elias's stomach twisted. This wasn't the savior he'd imagined. There was something cold in Ardashir's eyes, something that didn't care about human lives. But the Crusaders were gone, and the church was safe, for now. "Come with me," Ardashir said. "The city's heart must be cleansed." Elias hesitated, but Zoe grabbed his hand. "He's our only chance," she whispered. Demetrius nodded, picking up a sword from the floor. Maria stood, her hands trembling but her face set. They followed Ardashir into the burning city. The streets were chaos. Fires roared, buildings collapsed, and Crusaders looted everything they could carry. Ardashir moved like a ghost, untouched by the flames or the swords. When a group of Crusaders charged him, he raised a hand, and the hum stopped them cold. They fell, writhing, their eyes rolling back. Elias watched, horrified but awed. This was no miracle of his god. This was something older, something raw. Ardashir led them to the Hagia Sophia, the great cathedral at the city's heart. Its golden dome was blackened by smoke, its doors smashed open. Inside, Crusaders were tearing down icons, smashing relics. Ardashir stepped into the chaos, and the hum grew louder, shaking the walls. The Crusaders froze, then fled, screaming about a demon. Elias followed, clutching the scroll. "What are you going to do?" he asked. Ardashir didn't look at him. He walked to the altar, where a mosaic of Christ glowed in the firelight. He pressed his hand to it, and the hum became a roar. The air shimmered, and Elias saw shapes, shadows of figures with burning eyes, their forms shifting like smoke. The forgotten gods, he realized, his heart racing. "The city is poisoned," Ardashir said. "The old ones demand a cleansing. Blood for blood." Elias's mouth went dry. "What does that mean?" Ardashir turned, his eyes like pits. "The empire has forgotten its roots. It worships new gods, weak gods. The old ones will take back what is theirs." Maria grabbed Elias's arm. "He's not here to save us," she whispered. "He's here to destroy." Demetrius raised his sword. "Then we stop him." Ardashir laughed, a sound like breaking stone. "You cannot stop what is written. The empire falls, or it kneels." Zoe, barely 15, stepped forward, her voice shaking. We didn't ask for this. We just want to live. Ardashir's eyes softened, just for a moment. Life is not promised, he said. But I will give you a chance. Help me, and the old ones may spare you. Elias looked at the scroll in his hands. It spoke of a ritual, a way to bind the king's power. But it needed blood. Not just any blood, but the blood of someone pure, someone who believed. Elias's hands shook. Was he pure enough? Did he even believe anymore? We'll help, he said, his voice barely a whisper. He didn't know if he was saving the city or damning it. Ardashir led them to the crypts beneath the Hagia Sophia, a maze of tunnels damp with mold. The hum followed them, echoing off the stone. Ardashir carried no torch, but his crown glowed faintly, lighting the way. He stopped at a sealed door, its surface carved with the same Greek and Persian script Nikos had seen centuries ago. This is the heart, Ardashir said. Where the old ones were born. He pressed his hand to the door, and it opened with a groan. Inside was a circular chamber, its walls painted with gods, winged serpents, horned giants, figures with too many eyes. At the center was a stone altar, stained dark with old blood. Elias's stomach churned. This wasn't a place of worship. It was a place of sacrifice. Ardashir knelt before the altar, muttering words Elias couldn't understand. The hum grew louder, and the air thickened, like a storm was trapped in the room. Shadows moved on the walls, their shapes twisting, alive. Maria clutched Zoe, her face pale. Demetrius gripped his sword, but his hands shook. Elias opened the scroll, his eyes scanning the faded text. The ritual was there, a way to bind Ardashir's power, to send him back to his tomb. But it needed blood, and it needed faith. Elias's heart pounded. He'd been a priest, but his faith was crumbling. Could he do this? Ardashir stood, his eyes blazing. The old ones are here, he said. Give me the blood, and the city lives. Elias stepped forward, his voice trembling. Whose blood? Ardashir's gaze locked on Zoe. Hers, he said. She is pure. Zoe gasped, backing away. Maria screamed, throwing herself in front of the girl. Demetrius raised his sword, but Ardashir flicked his hand, and the soldier froze, his blade clattering to the floor. No, Elias shouted. Take me instead. Ardashir tilted his head, studying him. Your faith is weak. The old ones want strength. Elias's hands shook, but he held up the scroll. I know the ritual. I can bind you. Let her go, and I'll give you my blood. Ardashir's eyes narrowed. You would challenge the gods. I'm challenging you, Elias said, his voice steadier now. You're not a god. You're just a man who made a deal. The shadows on the walls hissed, their forms growing sharper. Ardashir's crown flared, and the hum became a scream. Then try, he said. But if you fail, the city burns. Elias knelt before the altar, his hands shaking as he read the scroll. The words were old, half forgotten, but he spoke them, his voice growing stronger. He drew a knife from his belt and cut his palm, letting the blood drip onto the altar. The shadows lunged, their eyes like fire, but Elias didn't stop. He chanted, the words burning in his throat. Ardashir staggered, his crown dimming. You cannot, he roared, but his voice cracked. The hum faltered, and the shadows retreated. Elias's blood pooled on the altar, glowing faintly. He felt the air shift, like a weight lifting. Maria grabbed Zoe, pulling her back. Demetrius broke free, lunging for his sword. But Ardashir wasn't done. He raised his hands, and the hum returned, weaker but still there. The old ones will not be denied, he said. Elias's vision blurred, his strength fading. He was losing too much blood. But he kept chanting, the words spilling out like a prayer. The altar glowed brighter, and Ardashir screamed, his body trembling. The crown of thorns cracked, falling to the floor. Stop, Ardashir shouted, but his voice was human now, not godly. He fell to his knees, his eyes wide with fear. You don't know what you're doing. Elias didn't stop. The shadows vanished, the hum faded. Ardashir's body crumbled, turning to dust, until only the golden mask remained, staring blankly at the ceiling. Elias collapsed, his breath shallow. Maria caught him, tears streaming down her face. You did it, she whispered. You saved us. When Elias woke, he was in a bed, the city quiet outside. The Crusaders had fled, driven out by fear of the demon in the Hagia Sophia. The survivors called it a miracle, but Elias knew better. He'd seen the old gods, felt their hunger. They weren't gone, just waiting. He kept the golden mask hidden, locked in the church's crypt. He didn't know if Ardashir was truly gone or if he'd rise again. The scroll was burned, its secrets too dangerous. Elias told no one, not even Maria or Zoe. But at night, he heard the hum, faint and distant, like a promise. The empire limped on, wounded but alive. Elias became a leader, guiding the people through the ruins. He prayed to his God, but he never forgot the old ones, or the king who served them. And sometimes, in the dark, he wondered if he'd saved the city, or just delayed its end.